the Honorable Chancellor, the distinguished Vice Chancellor, honored faculty, proud parents, graduating students, the medal winners, and dear friends. I want to thank the distinguished Vice Chancellor for inviting me to speak at this great university and for the gracious hospitality which was extended to me and my wife, Lata. In fact, my wife, Mr. Chancellor, has a family relationship with the university. Her grandfather is an alumni of this university. Her great-grandfather also had a relationship. Friends, I come here from Pune, which like Banaras is also considered a city of learning. Of course, I'm very mindful that in richness of heritage, Banaras is far greater than Pune. In our country, for centuries, Banaras has been a Punya Bhumi for its great achievements in both secular and the sacred, in the field of literature, arts, music, and the profound philosophical explorations of the cosmos. The achievements have been phenomenal. I don't think there is any place in the world which can possibly rival Banaras. It is in this land that Venerable Gautam Buddha delivered his first sermon and uttered his noble truths for the upliftment of humanity. It is here the great saint Kabir rendered his beautiful poetry imbued with love and deep human values. And who can ever forget the stunning philosophical reflections such as Manisha Panchokam by the great Adi Shankaracharya during his sojourn in the city. So to make a pilgrimage to Banaras is indeed a dream come true for someone like me from Pune. Indeed, sir, I'm delighted to be in this unique temple of learning built by the legendary Mahamana Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya ji with his patriotic fervor and full of dreams for our great country. On this day of important celebrations, I extend my warmest congratulations to all graduating students for their achievements and to their proud parents who sacrificed so much for the grand success of their awards. Sir, today I want to express my reflections on the current country's progress towards what our first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru so eloquently described in his midnight speech of 15th August 1947 as our tryst with destiny. To my mind, that this tryst meant wiping out the curse of poverty for our land and make our nation a prosperous and liberal republic and thus contribute handsomely our due share to the well-being of every nation of the planet and of course to the advancement of global peace. These days, one hears a great deal about possible danger of India getting into a middle income trap. What is this middle income trap? Scholars of economics development have categorized countries as poor countries, middle income countries, and high income countries. Internationally accepted norms for these categories are the countries with less than 1,000 US dollar per capita income are considered poor countries, while countries between $1,000 to $10,000 per capita are considered middle income countries, and the countries beyond more than $20,000 per capita are considered high income countries. Now the experience of last 200 years or so is that it is easier for a country to make a transition from a poor country to a middle income country, just like our own country's example, with our 3,000 per capita income, we are now become middle income country. However, the transition from the middle income country to a high income country has been elusive for many, many countries of the world. The most prominent examples of such countries which are trapped in the middle income level are from Latin America, Caribbean, East European. Closer home in Asia, Two, Japan and Korea are only two countries that have become high-income countries, and all other countries, including ours, are still in middle-income category. What about our country? How we should ensure that we achieve the transition to become a high-income, prosperous nation and thus redeem our freedom fighters' pledge in 1947. In the early years of independence, at a time when we were fresh from excitement of the freedom movement, where the Indian National Congress challenged the world's most powerful empire and won, our countrymen were full of hope about what was going to happen. And today I would like to narrate the important contours of this wonderful journey of our country. In this narration, we'll step away from the day-to-day news flow and I think of big ideas that matter. We have to look forward or look beyond small moves into evolving India. In India today, we are all impatiently running from one tweet to the next. We don't have time to cogitate about what we have been, but we must tell each other stories about the journey which we have been on so that we may understand our journey a little better and bring a greater wisdom to the next fork on the road of our prosperity. We all need to understand that since our independence, our fellow citizens have been involved with one of the most unique and, friends, if I may say so, one of the greatest development enterprise of the humankind. It is unique because millions of citizens embarked on achieving multiple transitions simultaneously, while other advanced nations did it sequentially, and that too also spread over more than 2 centuries. I cannot tell you how privileged we are that in our lifespan, we are getting an opportunity to be a part of this truly great Mahayajna. It is hard even to comprehend the India of 100 years ago, when our leaders, led by Gandhiji, got going on building the freedom movement. It was an India of incredible backwardness. To give you one illustration of how things were, it is an astonishing fact. Literacy in India in 1920 was only 8%, almost 100 years ago. Today, we are now exceed 75%. We know how bad it is that 25% is still illiterate. But can you even imagine in India where 92% were illiterate? And that's the starting point where our founding fathers had the nerve to challenge the British and also ambitions to envision what free India would look like. They wanted India to become a great and prosperous democratic republic. The founding fathers of our republic drew their inspiration for our syncretic civilizational heritage, as well as from the French Revolution, American Revolution, the Revolutionary Magna Carta, and most importantly, the robust good sense of the people of India. For 30 years leading to independence, some of the best minds in India, and like Mahanama, and from outside the country thought hard about the nature of the government of free India and needed economic, political, and social transformations, all to be achieved simultaneously and not sequentially as done by the West. The economic transformation involved harnessing the energy of free people to innovate, as today our distinguished Vice Chancellor pointed out, to innovate, to compete, and thus create firms inside in India with high productivity which compete with the rest of the world. At the same time, they face the problems of profound shortage of capital. So they had to embark how to create capital stock, or what economists call primitive capital accumulation. Political transformation involved going from power in the hands of few colonial masters and ICS officers to a liberal democracy with the dispersion power across millions of people. Democracy is the institutional systems of checks and balances and the rule of law. Liberal democracy involves voting in elections, of course, but it's much more than that. The essence of liberal democracy is a system of dispersion of power, of pitting interest against interest, and the rule of law. As Farid Zakaria says, the courts are probably more important, Mr. Chancellor, to our democracy than elections. One cannot overemphasize the uniqueness of independent India, adopting a system of liberal democracy at its inception, even when it was beset with the challenge of mass poverty and mass literacy. Friends, I cannot think of no other country which achieved this miracle. The social transformation involved elimination of the mistreatment of women, dehumanizing caste system, and profound neglect of Adivasis. All over India, we needed to set up revolutions or aspirations and individual agency so that women or the Bahujan, as Dr. Ambedkar has described, the Adivasis would think for themselves and live life on their own terms without being gripped of traditional social mores. So 100 years ago, our founding fathers started with 8% literacy and dreamed to work plan fighting mightiest empire in the world, setting up economic modernization and social modernization and political modernization. And towards this, we adopted what I call the first development paradigm. We have to remember that this was a difficult time in the world. From 1914 to 1950, there was a great economic and political turbulence in the world. In India, we faced the curse of partition, a war of 1948, and a distortion of colonial economy engaged by freedom struggle. The first development paradigm essentially was led by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, aided by Mahalanobis, Mr. Sri Pitambar Pant, and scholars like Professor Shukamat Chakravarti. It involved a leadership role for the government in every aspect of society. Mr. Chancellor, if you recall, Gandhi, although thought this was a bad idea, and future-proofed his hesitations with present, but I'm getting ahead of my story. This Nehruvian strategy gave the government the commanding heights of the economy. With a large public sector and myriad state initiatives, it was a golden age of our belief in government as being good, of government as being benevolent, government playing leadership role in the evolution of our country. In the early decades of independence, this worked rather well. Compared to previous decade, many good things in India today come from the wisdom of that period. But the excessive control and domination of government worked out rather poorly, as Mahatma Ji always thought. Within less than 2 decades, this approach led to license, permit, raid, raj, and all the problems that go with us. Our relative neglect of agriculture and primary education aggravated these problems. And this set the stage for the dark days of economic and political instability. In succession, we had a series of disasters: 62 war with China, Panditji's death in 1964, 2 consecutive droughts, and our living off food sent by American aid, and of course the bank nationalization in 1969. Despite these conditions, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi still won well in the 1971 elections. And after winning the war, that further concentrated power, but unfortunately, it gave way to an economic collapse. Further, there was a collapse of personal freedom with the emergence of 1975. By this time, it was very clear that the first paradigm had got dysfunctional and we need a different approach. And this led to adoption of what I call second paradigm for our country's strategy. It is important to see the long lags in the development and impact of ideas. The element of first paradigm was built from 1920 to 1947. It worked well for more than a decade, but with cumulative decisions, it generated stagnation. Second paradigm was developed by thinkers from 60s onwards, and critical elements were built by, interestingly enough, I think students should note, based on the PhD thesis of Dr. Manmohan Singh at Cambridge. And many others, such as Arun Shori, Abid Hussain, Professor Bhagwati, Professor T. Srinivasan, and many other scholars. These scholars were acutely aware that India was rapidly falling behind other dynamic economies East Asia. East Asian countries achieved great success in exploring export opportunities. For acceleration of growth and removal of poverty, these scholars argued in favor of liberalization and scaling back license permit Raj, and a greater role to private sector, and thinking actively to link with the global economy. These ideas were put in practice slowly from 1977 onwards, firstly with Morarji Bhai Desai as the Prime Minister, which changed the course over time in terms of Indian economic policy, and trend got strengthened on 79 onwards. In 1980s, the baton was passed to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi, who carried forward these ideas. This gave strong growth for some time, but we landed in a balance of payments problems and crisis in the 1980s. And this set the stage for the remarkable policy initiatives by the reforms led by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao with Dr. Manmohan Singh as his finance minister. And with sagacious policies as a Prime Minister, Atalji gave further momentum in 1990 onwards, kicking perhaps the greatest growth story in India's economic history. From 1991 to 2011, we got a growth of the kind which we had never seen before. Second paradigm thus involved thinking 1960 onwards and gave the miraculous growth decade of 1991 to 2011. But then, friends, the second paradigm too slipped. For some years up to 2011, series of action came about which changed confidence of the private sector, and in my belief that these three things went wrong. First, excessive meddling in the economy by the government continued. Government increased its use of protection measures, dampening growth impulses, and continue the economy beset with the micromanagement of the different sectors. Second, powers of intruding into the economy by the government are wielded by low rule of law. The multiplicity, this multiplied the business risk. To build business requires the management of uncertainties. And the very business model got destroyed because government interventions became somehow unpredictable, without warning, and the most classic example was 2012 retrospective tax. Third element was the investigative agencies became a serious problem. It is now an alphabet soup of agencies which can make life difficult for a private person. Companies have the resources to hire lawyers and accountants and deal with these threats, but smaller companies and individuals, this has become a nightmare. All these three problems have come together and changed the risk-reward trade-off in our economy. As a consequence, dynamism of private investment has, as well as exports, declined. And as you know, friends, trend rate of growth went down since 2011. But I just want to remark that this growth did not decline owing to the action in 2011, but many developments which were started much earlier. Now, reversing this decline in trend growth is the most important economic challenge facing India. I believe high growth is essential for our society. We'll feel, will fare better meeting our challenges of the social and political modernization if these are done in the context of high growth. And for this, we require what I call as a third paradigm for development. As an example, a central feature of new paradigm means women leaving the home and going to study and work in a new city. Similarly, it means women having complete safety in their workspace, because all over the world, it is the women participation in labor force where the GDP growth comes highest. And in India, Sir, Chancellor Sir, our women participation in labor is lower than even Saudi Arabia. Now, this is, I think, one of the great failure of our second paradigm. I believe that if we want to make the twist our destiny, we have to find a way out of this dark woods. What will it take? Recently, my colleague Professor Ajay Shah and I have recently written a book, which was recently published by Penguin. The book we call as In Service of the Republic, the Art and Science of Economic Policy. Today, this morning, I'll review some of the key ideas of this book. The ideas draw upon the work of many outstanding social scientists, political theorists, mainly from India, who are carefully studying developments in India as well as advances in recent economic science. Our book is essentially exploration towards identifying the contours of what I call the third paradigm, which involves the transformation of formulation and implementation of our economic policies, and thus also fundamentally strengthen our liberal republic. The foundation of liberal democracy and prosperity is individual freedom. We must strengthen the foundations of personal freedom and economic freedom, and this requires substantial reduction of government intervention in the economy. The government intervention is now, we are arguing, should be restricted in what economists call when there is a market failure. In other situations, we believe no government intervention is required, and will do well to removing all the interventions in the social policies. And if indeed when market failure is there, we should improve the quality of intervention. As an example, consider, fortunately I think Banaras is not as bad as Delhi, but air quality problems are North India. Here we believe that problem is not just policies, but severe lack of government or state capacity. So we have central challenge is to pursue and formulate policies in the presence of low state capacity. The path to state capacity, we believe, lies in reigning executive discretion. There's too much power in India in the hands of officials. We need to design laws and government organizations with much care. So the coercive power is used sparingly and wisely. Government agencies should first prove themselves with high level of capability and high levels of checks and balances before being given power to coerce and act. For instance, the income tax department should get the British-style powers to raid a person only if we achieve British levels of state capacity with strong protection of private person. We have argued in our book that in India today, we are veering around towards what we call the administrative state, which essentially means rule by officials who possess arbitrary power and who creep into legislative and judicial functions. We need to make a pushback on this. Laws must be drafted through negotiations with the legislature and not by some officials in the government. We need better functioning of the judiciary, and the arbitrary power of officials need to be replaced by rule of law system and elaborate checks and balances. These are the key ideas that we have argued should be implemented for the third tier. Now, my friends, the third wave or third paradigm is essentially about ideas and principles. The first paradigm, as I mentioned, worked through process of debate for almost for 2 decades. Similarly, the second paradigm also was developed through debate, another 20 years of debate. I think, similar fashion, I think we have to make a long journey of ideas to debate the elements of third paradigm and bring out a practical program of action, because without that, we cannot break the middle income trap. Friends, for the third paradigm to succeed, I cannot emphasize enough the great importance of liberal India of our founding fathers. The pledge of our founding fathers has to be renewed by every generation, because without that, our multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multilingual land of ours will unable to fulfill its truly great potential. And on this, I'm sure the BHU will not falter, but once again become a beacon of hope and enlightenment, and fulfill the dreams of Mahamana. In present turbulent times, BHU must remember and fulfill its dharma. I thank you all for your kind attention. Jai Hind.
I will now request the Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, to present our chief guest with a token of our immense respect and gratitude for him. औपचारिक धन्यवाद ज्ञापन के लिए अनुरोध है आदरणीय कुलगुरु महोदय से स्मृति चिन्ह की प्रस्तुति के बाद।